If you're interested in supporting the channel, there are two things you can do. Flipside Gaming is offering a 10% discount for any order $10 or more if you use the promo code VOIDMAGE on their website. That is VOIDMAGE in all caps. I will also have an affiliate link to tcgplayer.com. If you use that link, any purchase you make on that website will go towards supporting the channel. I appreciate the support. Also hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Hello everyone, welcome back to another Commander Deck Tech video. Doing another new Throne of Eldraine one. Gonna change it up a bit because with Throne of Eldraine and Kyrix Son of Yawgmoth from Commander 2019, we've been given so much mono black love, I'm starting to get a little sick of it. Torbran, Thane of Redfell is a 4-mana mono red 2/4 legendary dwarf noble. Really excited for a Gimli character here. If a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +2 instead. I know some people might be disappointed we don't get a dwarf synergy. It just seems to be mono red damage and that's about it. You could of course play dwarf tribal, but why would you do that? It's not going to be nearly as good compared to a deck where building around damage divided, trying to deal as much damage with red sources is the goal. And we have a ton of them. The deck I have for you guys, as always, will be linked to tcgplayer.com's deck builder. That way you get to see the price of the deck, all of the cards included. I'd like to point out that in my deck tech videos, I don't go over every single card because some of them are auto includes like Soul Ring, Lightning Grease, and I don't feel like talking about them. So what we want to do here is just damage. It's mono red damage and that's about it. Starting it off here with the lands. We like Valakut. The downside though is that it's not going to deal more damage because lands are colorless. In Valakut, although it is a pretty red looking land, it is colorless. So don't get that confused. It's just going to deal the 3 damage, which is still pretty good though. You want to pile on the damage any way you can get it. And to go with a Valakut, Myriad Landscape is a pretty nice land. Blast Zone and Buried Ruin are good utility lands. We don't always have the best removal in red, so the Blast Zone is pretty necessary. And the Buried Ruin helps us get back good mana rocks, so it never really hurts to play that in mono red. Speaking of artifacts, you're going to want to have some solid ramp here. We are going to play some burn spells. A lot of them are going to be X-costed. You want to take advantage of that. A good old Ruby Medallion to make your red spells 1 cheaper, and having artifacts that can tap for multiple mana like Hedron Archive, Thran Dynamo, and Gilded Lotus are nice to have, making it easier to get more mana into those X-costed spells. Caged Sun though is probably the best artifact we have. Gonna give us double mana when we tap our lands. Now the instants and sorceries are gonna dominate this deck. We're going to be dealing damage to not just opponents but creatures, so keep that in mind. Earthquake is pretty reliable because it could just straight up kill players, but it's going to deal with most problem creatures that don't have flying, of course. Jaya's Immolating Inferno, you deal it to 3 targets, which should be able to kill most opponents if you put enough mana into it. And yeah, even though you only get +2, it does add up. We do have some other sorceries that are going to deal damage to creatures. Mizzium Mortars, Anger of the Gods, Chain Reaction, Chandra's Ignition, and Blasphemous Act, making it much easier to kill our opponent's creatures. It's going to deal +2, so that's every one of your opponent's creatures. Torbran is going to help us out big time when it comes to board wipes. Now we do have some other sorceries that aren't necessarily board wipes. Browbeat is a pretty interesting one. Any player may have it deal 5 damage to them. If no one does, target player draws 3 cards, which is probably going to be you. If you have Torbran out there, it's going to deal 7 damage to them. And I don't think that many people would take 7 damage unless they've been gaining a lot of life. Fiery Confluence does split up some damage here. You have 3 modes, it's going to be 3 instances of damage. So whether you want to do that to creatures or opponents, Torbran will help you out +2 for each one. So if you deal 2 damage to each opponent and you choose that 3 times, that is going to be 12 damage to each opponent instead of just 6. So that is really deadly. And the new card Sundering Stroke is a bit more like Jaya's Immolating Inferno. However, we don't have the benefit of dumping a bunch of mana into an X-costed spell, so it is going to be a fixed amount of damage. We can still get the +2 off of Torbran though. And since we're mostly going to be playing mountains, it shouldn't be hard to put all red mana into this. And our instants are pretty cool as well. You're going to want to deal more damage. Playing a Lightning Bolt is going to be more beneficial. For 1 red mana instance, instant speed, you can deal 5 damage, so it is significantly better in Commander. Comet Storm's another nice instant, also an X-costed spell, so you could potentially kill opponents with this, but it's also nice if you can kill some creatures. Electro Dominance is a relatively newer burn spell that also gives you a free cast, so if you have something with a converted mana cost that's cheaper than X, you'll be able to play it for free. And Starstorm is more of a board wipe. There's also Price of Progress for just 2 mana. This might be one of the better burn spells in the whole deck. Deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. There are a ton of multicolored decks, a lot of 5-color decks too. They're going to be dealt a bunch of damage plus 2 with Torbran, so just a very efficient burn spell here. Now going into building this deck, a card I really had on my mind was Risk Factor. A target opponent may have Risk Factor deal 4 damage to them. If they don't, you get to draw 3 cards. It's the Jumpstart card as well, so you could play it again. This plus 2 is going to be 6. While in Commander we do have 40 life, nobody wants to lose that much damage for 3 cards. And since it is target opponent, you could just easily choose the weakest one of your opponents. Now our creatures are also going to help tack on some more damage. Harsh Mentor is going to punish an opponent whenever they want to activate the ability of an artifact, creature, or land. And if that ability isn't a mana ability, it's going to deal 2 damage to them. Thermo Alchemist is a nice card to have because you could untap it with our instants and sorceries. It's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent every time you tap it. So plus 2, it's going to be 3 damage, which is really disgusting if you can untap it in the same turn. Gutter Snipe, similar idea here. You get more benefit off of casting instants and sorceries, but it's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent instead of just 1. So you cast a lightning bolt, you could hit someone for 5. In addition to that, that same player is going to get hit for 4 off of a Gutter Snipe. Really disgusting cards. Rampaging Ferocidon. Each other creature entering the battlefield is going to force their controller to take a damage. Plus 2 to your opponents, of course. You're going to get hit with this, but it's not going to be as nasty. Sin Prodder is another solid advantage card. Kind of like a Risk Factor. An opponent could take damage if they don't want us to have that card. If not, we're just going to get more card advantage. Really solid creature. And then we have Zozu the Punisher, the Ankh of Mishra creature. There's a lot of land decks in Commander. If you had something like the Gitrog monster or Tatyova, this is the perfect card to hurt them. They're going to take 4 damage with Torbran. So whatever life you're gaining off your Tatyova, this should definitely offset that. Fanatic of Mogus is kind of like the Grey Merchant of Asphodel in red. Not nearly as good, but we can deal a bunch of damage to our opponents. Perforos, God of the Forge, might be one of the best cards in the whole deck. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, it's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent. Really disgusting. We can keep piling on that damage. Probably even easier than Gutter Snipe and Thermo Alchemist. Crimson Honor Guard can punish each player if they don't have their commander out there. It's going to punish your opponents even more because it's going to deal 6 damage with our Torbran. And Embermaw Hellion is similar to Torbran, but it's another red source we control, and it deals plus 1 damage instead of just plus 2. Still definitely worth playing because the more damage we can pile on, the better. And Heartless Hide Sugu deals damage to each player equal to half that player's life total rounded down on the tap ability. Also going to be plus 2. It is a relatively balanced ability, but when you consider our deck is built around burning our opponents, shortening that process is nothing but good. Neheb the Eternal should reward us with a bunch of red mana. We can use that red mana on our X-costed spells and hopefully kill some opponents. Stuffy Doll is a fantastic card in a deck where we can deal a bunch of damage to all creatures. Even though Stuffy Doll is a colorless creature, it's still nice to have something that can add on to the damage totals. And Combustible Gearhulk is kind of like the Risk Factor card. Our opponents have to consider taking a bunch of damage. With the addition of Torbran, they're probably not going to want to take a bunch of damage, and they will let you draw some cards. We have a couple good dragons to finish off the creatures. Balefire Dragon deals combat damage to a player and deals that much damage to each creature that player controls, so it could be a whopping 8 damage. Embogarden Hellkite deals 5 damage divided when it enters the battlefield, which depending on how you divide it could be even more. If you deal 1 damage to each target and you have 5 targets, that's going to be 15 total, which is really impressive. We have a couple good planeswalkers here, both Chandras, Torch of Defiance, and Awakened Inferno. A lot of people are liking Awakened Inferno, but I have to remind you that the emblems are not colored, so it won't be added to Torbran, but still a pretty good thing to have. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to add to the burn totals in the deck. Just 2 very solid planeswalkers that work out really well with our strategy. And the last part of the deck that I really want to talk about, because I think it's probably the best part, our enchantments are all burn oriented. And you've seen these in a lot of other decks like Mogus God of Slaughter. Citadel of Pain. At the end of each player's turn, turn, deals X damage to that player, where X is the number of untapped lands they control. Really hurts the blue decks, the decks that want to hold up mana for responses. Repercussion is perfect, one of the win cons in the deck if you have something like a Blasphemous Act. It is situational, of course, but we do have a lot of things that can deal damage to creatures, and we're not playing that many creatures, so it shouldn't hurt us that much. Spell Shock is going to punish players for playing spells. 2 damage each time, plus 2 that's going to get out of hand. Sulfuric Vortex is going to deal 2 damage at the beginning of each player's upkeep to that player. If a player would gain life, they gain no life instead, which is really important to have a card like this, because the one thing that can really screw us up is if an opponent has a bunch of life gain. Aether Flash is perfect whenever a creature comes into play, deals 2 damage to it. Does do it to our creatures, which is something to look out for, but you're going to deal 4 damage to each one of your opponent's creatures when they enter play. We have Burning Earth and Mana Barbs, so pretty much whenever an opponent wants to tap a land, they're going to be dealt 3 damage. We also have the awesome Furnace of Wrath and Dictate of the Twin Gods. These do pretty much the same thing. When we can add the +2, those damage totals are going to get out of hand. If you want to target a specific player, you could of course play the Curse of Bloodletting. The same idea, but it's a little bit more political. There's the Leyline of Combustion. Whenever you and or at least one permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, Leyline of Combustion is going to deal 2 damage to that player. It's going to be 4 damage instead with Torbran. Pyrohemia is ridiculous. You can pay 1 mana, and since Torbran does deal that extra damage to your opponents, you can afford to go crazy with this card. One of the big reasons why I wanted to play with Torbran in the first place. You had a lot of awesome enchantments like this, and since it is each instance of damage, it's just going to be the +2 every single time. But that's going to do it for the video. Let me know what you think about Torbran. Haven't played Mono Red in a long time. Really been looking for a solid commander option to do that with. And Throne of Eldraine is looking like a pretty good set for Commander, not just with the Brawl decks, but for the awesome legendaries like Torbran. You had the mono black ones. The mechanics are just crazy. But anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.